Welcome to the Oral Histories of Brockville series. I'm your host, Doreen Barnes. Joining me in the studio is well-known political leader, retired Senator Bob Runciman. Bob, welcome to the program of Oral Histories. So,
great to be here.
You are a Brockvillian, right? You grew up in Brockville.
I did.
Yes, yes. So what schools did you go to?
Oh boy, I'm trying to think early on. I went to the Douglas Haig School. I think that was my first. Do you remember where the Douglas Haig School?
No, where? No.
You know where the Barclays Funeral Home?
Yes.
That was the Douglas Haig School was there.
Okay.
And my family, we lived on Murray Street, so I was only a block and a half away from the school. So Douglas Haig, and then we moved a lot. Then my dad bought a place on Ravenna Place, and I went to Commonwealth.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And then from Commonwealth, we went to the Victoria School Annex.
All right.
And then we moved out to Rouse Corners and went to a school, Riverview Heights.
Okay, I hadn't heard of that one.
No.
It's
the building is still there. It's just where Sharps Lane is.
Yes.
It's on Sharps Lane. That's,
okay.
And then I'm trying to think. Then to BCI.
Then to BCI,
yeah.
And then you graduated from BCI, and then went on to McGill. Was it McGill?
No, I went to Queens, and then
Queens,
St. Lawrence College. Took municipal administration at St. Lawrence College. So I had an idea then I was going to get into municipal governance.
Yes.
And that was sort of my long-range plan. I studied political science.
So where did that seed come from? Where throughout when you were growing up, how did you become involved in? Well, you started with municipal, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
So how did you become involved?
I became involved, I would think, primarily because of my dad. My dad was the managing editor of the Brockville paper, and he was kind of a backroom advisor to the Liberal Party federally, and the Progressive Conservative Party provincially. He was a great friend of Tom Cossett, a federal member, and a longtime buddy of Jimmy Auld, who was the provincial MPP.
I remember him.
And that, of course, that lined up with the position, the editorial position of the paper. The Recorder and Times, they supported the Liberals federally and supported the Conservatives provincially.
Okay.
And so I think, Dad would be talking about politics all the time. And he was meeting with Tom and Jimmy, and so those conversations would be retold, if you will, at the dinner table. I think that was really what was the spark. And then when I worked for the Ottawa Journal, I covered virtually every kind of thing in this region, and I started to cover city council, and I think that was sort of really fed my interest in getting into politics in a full-time way.
Sorry, both you and your father were very involved in the community, were you not?
Yes, I was executive member of the Brockville Rowing Club. I was a president of the Girls Minor Softball Association. I was a union president, which you don't hear from too many conservatives. I was the union president. My dad was, chair of the planning board. He was on the Brockville General Hospital Board of Governors. He chaired the Ontario Review Board. He had all sorts of things. He was a busy guy. Plus, for up until I was about 19, 20 years old, he had the Sandy Runciman Orchestra, which was, renowned in this area, this part of Eastern Ontario, really. So it's a big band.
He was busy.
He was busy. And of course, back in those days, it was my mom didn't work outside the home, and he didn't make an awful lot of money, and so he had to supplement his income with the band, and so he was playing quite frequently on Fridays and Saturday nights. And other evenings he was out covering. He was a reporter back in the early days, and so he was a very, very busy guy, and in the early days certainly didn't have a lot of time to be around the house.
No. So as you were growing up in school, was there a teacher that you really could identify with and who was like a mentor to you throughout your high school years? Was there any teacher that really influenced?
Yeah, well, I think the
path?
person I was probably closest to over all those years, it was Don Runciman was at the primary level, and he lived close to us, and he was really a great guy. But at the high school level, I'd say Cecil Avery.
Okay.
Cecil was sort of the librarian at BCI, but
Okay.
he also taught. I think it was history, but he was just sort of a guidance counselor for me, and a good friend. He played piano.
Oh.
And he had played piano in my dad's orchestra at one time as well. So I think that kind of
Dovetailed into
it
knowing
did,
him
yeah.
a little bit better.
And we retained that relationship throughout the years. And he lived in Maorytown. I used to visit him on a regular basis, and he would give me his insights into the world politically and otherwise. And it was a great friendship that lasted throughout his lifetime. Yeah.
So you enjoyed sports as well when you were going to school, didn't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was a great athlete. My biggest interest was hockey, and I played in minor hockey. I played in the Gentlemen's League in Brockville as well. And my dad was president of the Majidoma hockey team.
Yes.
So I think that I followed that team actively. And I also, when I was working for the Recorder, I covered sports and went to a lot of junior hockey games, including when the Montreal Junior Canadiens were based out of Brockville. A lot of people don't realize that.
I didn't know that.
No, that's when the junior A teams, were owned by the NHL teams, the 6 NHL teams.
Yes.
And the Montreal Junior Canadiens
Wow.
played out of Brockville. That was their home base.
Oh my heavens.
Larry Robinson was playing for them at that time.
So the ice, the center that's downtown now.
Oh, I got that wrong, Larry Robinson. That was the Brockville Braves.
Brockville Braves?
Yeah.
But he had played for the Brockville.
He played for the
Yes.
Brockville Braves.
Okay.
He did. I'm trying to think of Ralph Backstrom and a lot of the older guys.
And they would have played downtown
They played in Brockville,
that
the
arena.
old arena, yeah.
Okay, all right. So do you still follow hockey?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
I've been a Leaf fan forever.
Have you?
Not much to cheer about.
I'm trying to think of some of the players from the Leafs. Punch Imlach, was
Punch
that?
Imlach,
Was
yeah.
he a Leaf?
He was the coach of the Leafs.
Yeah, okay.
I
So
don't know
that's
if he-
really going back,
yeah,
isn't
I don't know
it?
if he ever played in the NHL, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
King Clancy, I don't know if you remember
Yep,
that name,
I
King
do.
Clancy.
Uh-huh.
But my hero was Frank Mahovlich.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yes.
and then I got to work with him in the Senate, which was fantastic.
That's nice.
yeah.
That's nice. So 3 siblings,
Yes.
correct? Sherry, Jane, Tom. Am I close?
That's right.
Oh, good.
Sherry lives in Gatineau.
Uh-huh.
Janie is outside of Brockville. They're both retired nurses. And Tom and his wife live in Kingsport, Tennessee, and they run a small business down there. They're both nurses, registered nurses as well, but they moved out of the profession quite a few years ago and started their own business, and they're
Yes.
doing quite well.
Now, are you the oldest of the family then?
I'm the old guy. yeah.
You're the old guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about dinner at the Runciman.
Mhm.
If I came to dinner, you had mentioned earlier that you would be talking politics. What else would you be talking about if I was sitting next to you and you were years and years ago and we were having dinner with your dad and your mom and your siblings? What would we be talking about? Current
Boy.
events?
Yeah, primarily Dad. I have to say, kind of dominated.
Oh,
My mother was a very quiet person. I think it's fair to call her an introvert, and so Dad was quite the opposite. He was an extrovert and very, very intelligent guy, and could talk about anything. And so a lot of that, and he'd be asking us about our lives and what was going on in
Yes.
school, what we were doing here and there. And when he had a chance, he would we'd talk about hockey, of course, especially when he was with the Majidomas.
Yes.
And you know, he would come when he could. He'd come to see me play hockey, which wasn't all that often, but when he could make it, he would.
He would,
And down at the old rink, my great uncle Archie Miller was the first manager of the Brockville Memorial Centre. So, you know, he and Arch would be sitting down behind the bench when I was playing hockey. And but no, I think it was mostly just family stuff and
what
seeing
people
how we
were
were
doing,
Yeah,
in
that
their
was
daily
it.
lives.
Yeah, that was really it. You know, and
Who was the disciplinary in your family? Was it your mom or your dad?
well, my dad for sure.
Was it? Did you go running to your mother then after he?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
Maybe my sisters did, but I didn't.
But you didn't.
Of course, I never had to be disciplined. Right?
Oh well, there you go. You were a model child, right? So let's talk about your dad a little bit more. Your dad was very civic-minded. He was involved in so many things, as you have told us. But there's also a dam that is named after your dad.
Yeah.
That is the Runciman
That's
Dam.
right,
Tell
yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, I've said this before. I don't think my dad really got credit for all the community involvement that he had over the years and successes. But I remember as a child him talking about the back pond there, and that he was at the time talking to Jimmy Auld. He'd like to see a dam built and the dam create the back pond once again.
Yes.
And controlling the water flows through the city. And there used to be, of course, mills along that system as well. So then John Broome, who was the mayor of the city of Brockville, was a great friend of Dad's, and Jimmy Auld, as I said, was a longtime friend. So the three of them got together, and Jim was the Minister of Natural Resources at the time. And they were just, at that point, starting to create conservation authorities in the province of Ontario. And so what came together was the conservation area, the Mac, which we now call Mac Johnson.
Yeah.
And the dam itself was named after my father and John Broome. And so I'd say maybe 10 years ago, John Broome Jr. and myself, we paid to have a plaque put in place out there in a nice little setting. And my primary reason for wanting to do that was that people were thinking the dam was named after me.
Yes, and it was your dad.
Because I was the MPP at the time and
Right.
had profile, and nobody,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say nobody, very few people knew my dad's role in that. So we wanted to have something there that talked about my father's role and John Broome's father's role in making that all happen.
I think that's nice.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very nice. So your dad had the Sandy Runciman Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever play in it?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I did actually. I played trumpet. And,
You played trumpet.
but I was usually second or third trumpet. My dad had a big band, like 12, 14 pieces, and
Yes.
he would play with smaller groups on occasion, depending on what was required. But no, I remember, from a kid, being a little kid, I used to help him set up the orchestra.
Okay.
And we went to places that are no longer there. I'll give you an example. Is the old CNRA Hall.
Where was that?
That's the Canadian National Recreation Association. That's when the CN had over 1,000 employees in Brockville. It was a big thing.
Okay.
Big employer, the biggest employer. And they had their recreation hall, I'm trying to think of roughly where it would be, where the Royal Bank is on King Street,
Yes.
down right in that area.
In that area?
That could
Okay.
be. And it was, the Island City restaurant was underneath it.
Oh.
And then you went up to the third story, and there was a big dance hall up there. And that's where Dad used to play there pretty well every Saturday night. And so I went up several times and helped him set up there. Another place that's no longer around, which I used to help him set up, was the old Brockville Country Club. Down on the river, where the country club place condominiums are now.
Okay.
That was where the old country club was. A beautiful old building, and they had a great dock out into the river, and people used to shoot their old golf balls out into the river. So those are a couple of places. And another place my dad used to play, which is no longer there, he and a fellow by the name of Bill Henderson, who was Henderson's Butcher Shop down in King Street. He was a friend of my dad's, and two of them got together, and they built a place called Danceland.
Danceland.
You know where the White House Motel is?
Yes.
Well, that was where Danceland was.
Really?
It was, and they pretty well lost their shirts on it, though. I think it lasted about 2 years, but it was,
Yeah.
it was quite a spot for a
That's
while.
neat. Wow. Wow. So we talked about you running for council and then eventually going into a more political role
Full-time, yeah.
as MP. When did and I'm thinking about your wife, Jeanette. When did you meet? Did you grow up with Jeanette? Like, how did you meet her?
We're going to high school. She was a friend of my sister Sherry's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and actually, I remember when we first met, we were down in the parking lot of the Recorder and Times downtown. And I was with my dad up in the newspaper, and we came down going home, I guess. And sitting in the car was my sister and Jeanette. So that's how we first met.
That's how you met. Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
So how long after did you ask her out? What did you? Because most guys are shy and they kind of wait like a month or 2 months, and then eventually they ask.
I think I saw her a few more times at the house, but I think it was probably 3, 4, 5 months before I actually asked her out.
Yeah. It takes a little while.
Yeah.
So and you have 2 daughters,
Yes.
right?
We lost a son.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Suzanne and
Robin. Yes.
And so, with you being so involved in politics, you were away a lot.
Yeah.
You must have been away a lot.
I was.
But so really, when the girls were growing up, were you the one that they would go to and say, "Oh, Daddy"? Were you the softie?
I'm probably more of a softie now with them than Jeanette is. I think that I was still looked to be the disciplinarian. I think Jeanette would come to me and say,
"You need to do something."
"Yeah, you better talk to her."
Yes.
Because I'm having a problem here. And so I think we tried to kind of share that responsibility. But I think at the end of the day, if Jeanette wasn't getting the reaction or response that she was hoping for, she wanted me to add my voice.
Let's talk about Brockville. Let's talk about some of the industries that were here as you were growing up.
Yeah.
There were tanneries, were there not? There was the...
Stetson's hat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There was
Smart's
Stetson.
Foundry.
Yes.
Yeah. The waterfront had, I think it was Alt's Creamery down in the water where the executive is now. I believe it was Alt's Creamery.
Busy down there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a busy area. Because I remember as a kid, the pickle factory out on Blockhouse Island.
There was a pickle factory?
A pickle factory out there, yeah.
Really?
And then the yacht, once they closed down the yacht club, that was their first, I think that was their first, full-time location.
Oh my heavens.
Yeah. And trying to think of other businesses, of course, where I call it the mill restaurant.
Yes.
That was sort of an imperial oil base, and they had the big storage tanks over on the other side of the creek there.
Did they?
All kinds of big storage tanks.
Okay, that I didn't
And that
know.
was the what is now the yacht club was a laundromat, a laundry. A laundry. I can't recall the name of it, but was a laundry down there.
So the tunnel now is open, but when it was closed, I was talking with A.J. Benoit, and he told me, didn't tell me, he admitted that he would sometimes sneak in there when it was closed. Did you and your friends ever go into the railway tunnel when it was closed and there was little streams of water running down there?
I don't remember the doors being closed. I remember walking through it.
Oh, yes?
And always being worried that an engine was going to come through.
Okay.
Because I do remember, steam engines coming through there.
All right.
And there was, even I can recall down on the waterfront, as you come through the tunnel, there was buildings down there which were owned by the railway. And, and there was, of course, boats used to come in there too. I can still remember my grandmother had a cottage on Higgins Island Do you know where Higgins Island
No,
is?
I don't.
You know, down where the beach is at St. Lawrence Park?
Yes.
There's an island straight across
Yes.
from it. That, I don't think it's, I'm not sure if it's called Higgins Island anymore or not.
Okay.
But there were 5 cottages on that island.
5.
5 cottages and several boathouses and an ice house.
Oh my heavens.
And we used to spend a lot of time up there on weekends in the summer. And I remember sitting up there as a very, very young guy and seeing these old passenger vessels
Yes.
going up and down the river.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. I had read somewhere too that during the summer, people, that Sunday afternoon, you were on the water.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody just gravitated towards the water, and you were out there. There was, what's the boat or canoe that was built here in Brockville? I can't remember where it was, but anyway, it was attributed to that a lot of people would use these boats when they went out. The other thing that I have read about is the Bricklin. Was it the Bricklin Auto? There was an auto industry here in Brockville at one time.
Wasn't the Brooklyn though, that was
what
New
was it?
Brunswick.
That was New Brunswick.
Yeah.
What was the one that was here then? Do you remember? Okay.
That
There was
is
one
before my time.
Oh, okay, but there was one that was here. I do remember that. So, you're retired now.
Yeah.
Was it hard to switch from public life to private life?
Yeah, I'd say what I miss the most, I miss some of the people. I did when I
Yes.
left Queen's Park. I have some really good friends, which I don't see very often anymore. And several of them are now in government as ministers, so they're really busy.
Yes.
And I made some good friends in the Senate as well. But I think I really miss having a platform to, because I still have a lot of opinions and views on issues, and you know, nationally and locally as well. And one of the things I was able to do in the Senate, of course, was to do some things regionally and
Yes.
nationally. I had 4 bills pass the Senate, and 3 of them became law in the country. So that was in just 7.5 years. So, you know, I miss having that opportunity to do that sort of thing. And
Yes.
but it's a mandatory retirement age. I didn't feel like retiring, and touch wood, I'm still in good shape, and
Yes.
physically anyway.
And you have been asked to become chair. Is it chair of the St. Lawrence?
Parks Commission, yeah, I'm now
Yes.
the chair, and I chaired my first meeting last week, actually.
How'd that go, okay?
Yeah, we got through it anyway.
Good.
Still standing.
And you're also chairing the committee for the lighthouse too, are you not?
Yes, yes, that's
So,
going
and
well.
how is that coming along?
That's going well. We're a little over $140,000 right now. Our goal is 200, but we're also going to go out for a RFP, request for proposals, in the next couple of weeks. So then we'll be really able to get our hands around, you know, what is the ultimate cost of this going to be. And
Yes.
we're hoping that we can have a little bit of a reserve fund for the township to look after future maintenance as well. But I think it's going pretty well.
Good, good.
Yeah.
And so what else are you doing? Are you writing your memoirs?
You know, I started writing a book a few years ago, and I got a chapter and a half done, and then I sort of put it under the bed, and I still keep hoping that I'm going to get back to doing that. I regret that I didn't keep a diary over all my years in politics, because there were so many interesting things that happened.
Yes.
And you know, so many leaders that I served under, and then I had the opportunity to be opposition leader on a couple of occasions and interim leader of the party, and then our time in government as well. So a lot of things that you know, I can recall some of them as we have a conversation, but a lot of the nitty gritty you just forget because you don't write it down. And
No,
I think
and when it's
that's
gone,
one regret I have about my life in politics. Yeah.
Yeah. But you still have a good memory of the really, really, really important things.
Yeah, well, you know, council too, and city council. I served in city council for a little over 8 years, and John Broome was the first mayor, and it was really an honor to serve with John. He was a fantastic mayor and a good person, and you know, one of the things that really helped me, he appointed me in my first term as chair of the Urban Renewal Committee, and that was a committee that hadn't done anything, and I was a rookie. So they put me on a committee that didn't do anything and made me the chair. But then, a few months after that, the federal and provincial governments announced the urban renewal program and the residential rehabilitation programs. So we had millions of dollars available. So I was chairing the committee that had millions of dollars thrown into its lap. And so it gave me an opportunity to go out and talk. We did community neighborhood meetings and all this sort of thing.
Yes.
And come up with a plan. We did a lot of sewer, sidewalk replacement, separation of sewers. We bought the property for the museum
Yes,
in
the Beecher
Brockville.
House.
I worked with Mac McNaughton, who was the owner of Central Canada Coal. He and I worked a long time at that. We bought the old mill property. We developed little mini parkettes throughout the downtown area. The idea was to really help to restore the downtown. And then that was a big turning point for me in terms of name recognition in politics, which is important, especially at the municipal level. And the other key turning point, I think, for my career at the municipal level was the collapse of the roof in the Memorial Center, the old Memorial Center.
Okay, why?
Well, I'll tell you why. To me, that was the greatest, one of the best rinks in Eastern Ontario.
Yes.
Seated 3,000 people, had a great area where people could have a coffee and a bite to eat and look down at the rink. I opposed tearing it down, and I led the campaign to save the Memorial Center. And at the end of the day, we lost because the fire marshal came in and said, you're going to have to spend millions more to bring it up to current code.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting us repair the roof, he wouldn't let us do it.
Yes.
In hindsight, we should have fought him on that too. But I would say 90% of the city of Brockville agreed with my position. That was a great rink, fantastic rink. A small portion of the roof collapsed. Why didn't we just repair that small portion?
Yes.
But we ended up with tearing it down and building a smaller, much smaller rink in the north end. We had an NHL ice surface on the old rink, seat 3,000. And at playoff games, you'd get 3,300 people in there. It was fantastic. So I think that gave me a huge profile, not just in Brockville, but beyond, because that's when people got the newspaper.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
All through the whole area. And I think when I ran for the nomination, the Progressive Conservative nomination in 1981, this was just months after the Memorial Center furor, I went out to that race with a very, very high name recognition.
Yes.
So I think it helped me enormously in terms of being successful in that, getting that nomination.
Do you read a lot? Do you have a favorite author? Is there a favorite genre that you like to read?
I read mysteries a lot.
You like mysteries?
Yeah, I read mysteries.
So you want to know who done it?
Yeah, well,
Or how it was done?
Michael Connolly is my favorite author. He writes the Bosch series. If you ever heard, there's a television series now based on his novels. One of the things about politics and inspiring me politically was a book called The Making of the President in 1960 by Theodore H. White.
Okay.
And it was all about the 1960 race between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And it, went through both campaigns from grassroots, getting their nominations, parties, right through to the presidential election. And, I've read that book 3 or 4 times. And it also sort of, grew my interest in politics, and I've kept that book around forever. And he did a couple more of those. I think he did 64 and 68 as well, presidential elections. But the 1960 book was a sort of another turning point for me in terms of generating interest in politics as being part of my life.
What's your favorite dessert? Or do you like desserts?
Oh yeah,
You do?
butterscotch pie.
Why? Why butterscotch?
I don't know why. I just love it. I'll tell you a funny story about butterscotch pie. I don't know if you remember Ray McClure.
Yes.
He was a police officer and a member of city council.
Yes.
And he was a great friend and supporter of mine. He was like my big uncle or big brother. He traveled with me in every campaign. And there was a lady out in the Smiths Falls area in South Elmsley Township, and she was a supporter of mine. And she knew I loved butterscotch pie. So we were on the campaign trail on election, and she said, stop in when you're going through the South Elmsley Smith Falls area, and I have something special for you. So So we went in, and she had this butterscotch pie she made for me.
Oh, how considerate.
She's a wonderful lady. She still visited her this week, actually. She's 94 years old now.
Really?
Yeah, she's in a retirement home.
Aw.
Great lady. Anyway, we said, well, I'm not sure we can get back to Brockville without having, so she gave us 2 forks. And that was a mistake because I was driving.
Yes.
So on the way back to Brockville, I think McClure ate more than half the
You
pie.
did. Well, that's nice. People can be very considerate, okay?
Yeah, he was great fun to have on the campaign trail, I'll tell you. He was a character.
If there was one gentleman, or even a woman, who is no longer with us, who was in politics or wasn't in politics, that you have admired, either internationally, nationally, or whatever, who would that person be that you would like to sit down with for maybe an hour?
Well, I think that this wouldn't surprise some people I know I'm a conservative. I would say Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher.
Really?
And one additional person would be Winston Churchill. Just a fan of all three. And if I ever had an opportunity to sit down and have a coffee or a tea or a beer with any one of those three, that would be a fascinating experience, I know, for sure.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought maybe Reagan, but Thatcher, that's very interesting that you would.
Yeah.
Would there be any specific questions that you would ask? Or would you just sit down and just have a nice conversation with them?
With Reagan, I'd probably talk about his career in the motion picture industry as well as politics. Because I think he was very much a Democrat early on in his. He was president of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yes.
And then he sort of saw the light and became a conservative. So I think I'd talk a bit about that transition. And with Thatcher, in a way, I'd like to talk to how she dealt with unions.
Yes.
Because that was a big challenge for her, getting into government and staying in government, and bringing some of the rank and file union members on side to the conservative messages. And so I think that would be an interesting element. And of course, you can talk about their relationship with Gorbachev and the whole able with the Berlin Wall and those significant issues around that. I think they were a great team, Thatcher and Reagan, and so I think those are the kinds of things I'd like to talk to them about.
Thank you for sitting down with me today and talking about your life. I know we touched on politics a little bit, but you're so well known out there in the political field that I thought it would be nice to talk to Bob Runciman, the Brockvillian, and I think we've done that. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doreen.
And thank you for tuning in. Till next time, I'm Doreen Barnes.